Hello, I'm Harley Schlanger from the Schiller Institute. Welcome to our webcast with our founder and chairman, Helga Zepp LaRouche. It's October 11th, 2019. And as we're coming to you today, we're seeing the collapse of the system. It's unfolding rapidly. It's leaving its mark on politics, on economics, on everything, even though it's not in the media. But I think to start with, we should comment on this fairly extraordinary press conference given by Donald Trump on October 9th, where he addressed the question of why he's for ending the never-ending wars. Helga, what were your thoughts when you saw this press conference with Trump?
Well, I'm actually, very happy. And I think we should really encourage all our viewers to watch this video clip yourselves, because the Western media is not going to report it. They have not yet done it, and they may never do it. Uh, as a matter of fact, they are completely distorting it. But what Trump did in this press conference, I would actually say, makes him an absolute candidate for the next Peace Nobel Prize. And I'm saying that, the Ethiopian president just correctly and justifiably got the Peace Nobel Prize, which has been given to many unworthy people in the past. But what Trump actually said is really historic, because he reverses I would say, at least 50 years of paradigm shift, which we talked about many times, which followed the assassination of John F. Kennedy, which led the United States on the path of the Anglo-American unipolar world rule, which, back and forth with different presidents changed. But Trump is reversing that, and he's obviously, bringing the United States back in the direction of what the United States was intended for, with the U.S. Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. And I know that many of our viewers will have already, a hard time to breathe, up to hyperventilation when I'm saying this, but please listen to the speech yourself. What Trump said is, he referred to Eisenhower. He said we have to end these endless wars, and this has been all done by the military-industrial complex, of which Eisenhower warned at the end of his office. And they are making a lot of money by fighting these wars, but we have to end it. He said these wars cost $8 trillion. They cost many American lives, but millions of lives on the other side. We went there in with a pretext of a supposed weapons of mass destruction, and they did not exist. There were none. And now we have to bring our soldiers back. So then at the end of his remarks, he went into a very moving personal observation, and I believe him. When you have politicians, you always have to watch, are they making a show and for some purpose. But I think there was actually something coming out of Trump which people should know around the world, because he said the hardest thing for him to do as a president is when dead soldiers come back in a coffin, and the parents first seem to be okay, but when they actually see the coffin with their son or their daughter with an American flag on top of it, many of them break down crying. And he said this is the hardest thing, and this has to absolutely stop. Now, I think this is world historic. If he can actually manage to carry through with that, and I think after this press conference, I think he has set so that all the set the path so that all the opponents of this policy will have to follow, which they don't always do. And it is a historic game changer of the highest strategic importance. And you can tell, the people who are now attacking that the United States is pulling out of Syria, they are the real imperialists. So you can see the mainstream media, many politicians around Europe who are hysterical about that, and actually in the United States, the neocons, the Democrats. But I can only say this is absolutely a historic step and deserves absolute support.
There are two things that struck me about this that I think are important. One is people who are saying the Trump decision to withdraw is going to destabilize the region. what destabilized the region was the wars that were launched under the British imperial geopolitics that the opponents of Trump support. So there's a high-level hypocrisy there. But I think the other thing, Helga, what you're alluding to is that what emerged from Trump, watching him, is you could see there's a personality there of one who actually cares. Unlike the caricature of Trump that comes from the opponents and the impeachment crowd, he really was putting forward a sense of caring about the lives of people and the difference that governments can make. Now, as you said, we've got to see if he can carry it through. There are discussions underway from Lavrov and others. The Russians are very much involved. How do you see, or what should the next step be for the United States?
Well, I think they should work with Russia, actually, you know. And Lavrov just made an extremely important comment by basically saying, you know, that this was the policy of Bush and Obama, and that Russia warned the US administrations, previous administrations, many times not to play the Kurdish card against the Arabs. And, you know, I mean, a lot of things may come out now, because remember that it was General Flynn who in 2012 went to Obama and tried to warn him against this policy of, you know, de facto supporting ISIS and so forth. So, you know, this is all very, very interesting. And as you say, you know, the region is not destabilized by the US pullout, but follow-up has to be done. It has to include close cooperation between the United States and Russia. Lavrov already said that, you know, that what needs now to be activated is the Astana process, namely, you know, that Turkey has to talk to the Syrian government, and there has to be a diplomatic solution involving all parties of the region: Iran, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, the Syrian government, and naturally the big neighbors, the United States, Russia, China, India, but also the United States. I think if one takes this region as a whole and then starts to put in development, which only will be possible by the extension of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is already, you know, in the cards, so to speak. China is committed to play a key role in the reconstruction of Syria. I think this has an absolute potential of turning an almost hopeless region in the very near future into a region of development and prosperity. And then the climate for recruitment of terrorism will change, that it will dry out, because one of the major reasons why these terrorist groups were able to recruit is because of the extreme level of poverty and no perspective. And if you put in now economic development, this can all change to the better in a relatively short period of time. Not solve all problems overnight, but change the directionality, rebuild Afghanistan, bring in development that will improve the situation for the women. There are many things which will be affected, provided you have the new Silk Road extended into this region.
And I think bringing in this bigger picture brings up the really important question of the role that your husband, Lyndon LaRouche, played over the years of presenting alternatives to the British geopolitical doctrine, including precisely this kind of great power arrangement, a Russia, China, United States discussion process. Doesn't this really show why Lynn was thrown in prison? Because he was talking about this in the 70s and 80s.
Well, I think this is now the moment to escalate the campaign for the exoneration of Lynn, because, you know, this is, first of all, I think it's very good because the New World Economic Order, which is emerging with the Belt and Road Initiative, the perspective of a cooperation between Trump and Russia, and hopefully Trump and China, is exactly what his vision was. And, you know, if the United States goes back on the idea of becoming a republic again, then, you know, this is what he has been working for. I mean, my husband worked for at least 50 years, if not more, to bring the United States back to the course of what it was intended to by the founding fathers. However, his exoneration right now is the, in my view, absolute necessary ingredient to make this policy work. Because, the other major change which is going on is that the system is finished. We are in the middle of a financial collapse. This collapse is not coming. I think there are absolutely hectic moves by the Federal Reserve, by the central banks in general, to try to somehow, find a way. But I think we are in an acute crisis. And even if the media are not telling you anything about it, I think that there are all the signs that we are in a much deeper crisis than in '98, when the Federal Reserve called on the 16 largest financial institutions to bail out LTCM, which was regarded to be systemic at that time. And we are in a situation exactly like it was 2007, 2008, when the basically the Lehman Brothers crisis really, caused the foundations of the whole system to shake. And since the central banks have done absolutely nothing since then, other than quantitative easing, money printing, bailouts, we are now at a point where all the signs are that there are absolutely hysterical moves, because it's the suspicion is that at least one, if not more, of the very big banks, maybe some insurance companies, are absolutely on the verge of disintegrating and bringing down the whole system with that. So the four laws of my husband: immediate Glass-Steagall, go back to national banking, a credit system, a crash program for the increase of the productivity of the economy through fusion and space cooperation, a new Bretton Woods. These are the absolute necessary remedies at this point. And I think it has to go along with the exoneration, because I don't think otherwise people can think straight. So I'm calling on you in this moment of crisis to come and act with us.
Just sticking with the financial collapse for a moment, I think one of the things that's most interesting is that we're seeing this emergency pumping of liquidity, which was supposed to have stopped at the beginning of October. Now it's being extended into mid-November. But also, interestingly, they had said there would be a $75 billion limit, and yet yesterday it was $88 billion. So, Helga, I think this does show that the desperation that you mentioned is there. One of the key people involved in this is Mark Carney, of the governor of the Bank of England. What is his role? What is he doing to try to contain this collapse, but to build up new bubbles?
Well, my educated guess would be that he is the key opponent of President Trump, because, the plan of Mark Carney and the other central bankers is very clear. They have moved after the Paris Climate Agreement in 2015 to set up mechanisms to divert all financial investments in green financing. The whole CO2 debate is really a way of basically, making sure that no investments, no credits are channeled anymore to the real economy, but that all is going into the speculative bubble of CO2 emission trading and similar things. And they have set up basically an assault. It became very clear at the Jackson Hole annual meeting of the central bankers and key players in the finance system, where Mark Carney called for a regime change. You could say implicitly he meant a regime change against President Trump, the coup, being on line with the House of Lords, saying that a second Trump administration cannot be allowed under no circumstances in the interest of the Anglo-American special relationship. But he also meant to replace the dollar with a global internet currency. And basically, in Tokyo at another conference together with Bloomberg, he basically said that the key corporations will have to deliberately reduce their CO2 emissions. And if they don't do that, the central banks will make rules which will force them to do so. Now, this is a declaration of war because in 2008, it was still the savings and loans banks who could provide credit to smaller firms, to the medium and small industries, the Mittelstand, and that way they survived. But if you would have now rules, which also Ursula von der Leyen, in her capacity as the new president of the EU Commission, said she would implement, if you have that, you have an eco-fascist dictatorship. It would eliminate industry. It is really what this Greta business is all about, because Greta is just the poor girl they are using, but the whole climate question is really a pretext to rechannel the financing in the direction of green financing, and that means population reduction. There is no way how you can go out of coal, out of gas and nuclear. They don't want also without causing billions of people to die, and that is a very serious matter. So this is why they are so freaked out against Trump. Trump moved out of the Paris Accord. This was obviously not intended to ever happen. Obama, a president like Obama was absolutely in their pocket, and then comes Trump and pulls out of the Paris Accord. And Trump, and I think what he just did in terms of pulling out the military out of Syria, Trump also has the potential of acting in the middle of the financial crisis in a quite different way than it is in the interest of these central banks. As a matter of fact, he's in a permanent war with the Federal Reserve already, which also the media is always portraying as if he's attacking the independence of the Federal Reserve. He is not necessarily saying everything right all the time, but he does have the potential in a crisis like this to implement Glass-Steagall, to basically go back to control of the credit system. It does not happen necessarily automatically, but that is why I'm calling on you, our viewers, to work with us, to help us to bring in this question of the four laws internationally, not just in the United States, but internationally, because only if you go for a global Glass-Steagall as an absolute precondition, you reorganize the financial system to become a credit system, a new Bretton Woods system, as Lyndon LaRouche has defined it many times. Only then do you have a chance to get out of this crisis. And that requires an international mobilization. And it also demonstrates that our organization, in a moment like this, is the most important ingredient to make this work, and therefore also help with the exoneration of Lynn, because people have to study his works. They have to look of what is the physical economy method of his thinking to do this right. So I'm actually quite optimistic that it can be done, because big changes are happening, and sometimes you need a huge crisis to get rid of something very evil, like the present monetary system.
Well, and it certainly seems that this issue of population reduction is becoming more evident, that the idea that more people must die more quickly, we're seeing this emerge in all kinds of discussions. And one of the most shocking, maybe it's not so shocking to people who have been following this, is this event that's going on at the Vatican on climate. What can you tell us about that?
Well, that's really an incredible thing, I mean, I think the Catholic Church, with this Pope, is really abandoning Christianity. I mean, they in this synod on the Amazon, they openly talked about Mother Earth. I mean, don't they know that the whole Gaia cult, that Christianity was the absolute necessary emergence, if you want, the emergence of Jesus Christ was the absolute war against these kinds of pre-Christian cults, like the Gaia cult, which is the greeny idea of cyclical world outlook. And Christianity was the absolute overcoming of that idea of cyclical ideas about the cosmos and nature and so forth. This is really bad. The Pope also talked about that to the normal catalog of sins, one has to now add ecological sins and make that a real sin. I mean, this is completely, I mean, this is really unbelievable. Unfortunately, the Protestant church is no better. They are equally green. And, I really think this is a crisis. This whole thing has confirmed what a close friend we had many years ago in the Curia, who unfortunately is no longer alive, who told us that this was long before the sex scandal of the church erupted, that he was deeply concerned that the church may not continue to exist after 2000 years. And I think this is, in one sense, a synonym for a lot of things what is going on. Because, with the church going green like that, this means they may not exist. And we see right now that all the institutions which we thought would be there forever, they're crumbling because a system is crumbling. And what this requires, in all honesty, is a serious discussion among adults, among well-meaning people around the world. What should be the international order which mankind must give itself to have an enduring, long sustainability of the planet? And by that I mean, how can we as a human species give us a set of international relations and of principles which allow us to exist for the next, millions of years, and not just, the next 18 months or so. So I think this church thing is really worrisome. And I know that there is a lot of opposition in the church, as there is a lot of opposition in the central banks. For example, the German board member of the EZB, Sabine Lautenschlager, she resigned, and there are all signs that she disagreed with this money pumping. So we are in an absolute tumultuous change of an epoch. And I want to invite people to really give some thought what the new epoch should be like. And we have discussed many things about it, and especially the writings of Lyndon LaRouche are the absolute required must reading for the answer to that question.
And I think this Vatican synod conforms to what was warned by, I believe it was Lavrov, that the West is entering a post-Christian era. But while the elites may be going that way, I still think there are many, many people who are Catholics who reject this and need to take to the streets now, take this fight out on this question of what is the real nature of man. Now, one other aspect of this fight is the discussion that's now going on in Washington. The Chinese delegation is coming in. There'll be talks on pursuing the trade agreement. What do you know about that, Helga?
Well, one can only hope that it will go well. Vice Premier Liu He is leading a very large delegation of Chinese leaders of the Commerce Department and similar institutions. And Trump initially said that he thinks there is a good perspective. Now, I really hope that will lead to a resumption of the relationship between the United States and China. And, I can only hope. I don't have any inside knowledge at this point, because, there are lots of things going on which threaten that. The Hong Kong color revolution, the continued circulation of lies on Xinjiang, and the weapons to Taiwan, the destabilizations in the South China Sea. So, I think if they come to some kind of an agreement, and at least the escalation of the tariffs will be prevented, that would be a good thing. And I can only repeat what I said many times, that the United States and Europe can only profit from cooperating with the Belt and Road Initiative. I mean, just look what China is doing. I mean, I'm so excited. I traveled several times with the Maglev already, both in the test run in Emsland in Germany, but also in between Pudong and Shanghai. And the Maglev is already a very incredible technology because, it has the character that it accelerates very quickly from 0 to full speed, but without the kind of pushback you get when you give gas in a car. So now the Chinese are building a road between Wuhan and Guangzhou. This is 1,000 kilometers long. The maglev which is supposed to drive there will be 600 kilometers. However, the actual train is already designed to go potentially 1,000 kilometers. Already with 600 kilometers per hour, this will reduce the travel time from Guangzhou to Wuhan from 10 to 2 hours. So, I think these are all things which would do an incredible benefit for Germany. You have now the idea to, put more cargo and passengers on train rather than flights, which we have demanded for decades, because it just doesn't make sense to go by plane on such short notices. But just to improve the old ICE, that's just no vision. What we need is some maglev approach, like what China is doing, to have the fast maglev for inner city traffic, and to have the urban traffic with the so-called slow maglev, which goes 160 kilometers per hour, which is perfect for inner city traffic because it reduces the travel time enormously. We would need that for the United States. So I can only hope that some of these ideas are being discussed, and hopefully this will be resolved.
And on this track, there was a very interesting proposal made by Lyle Goldstein for the US to join with Russia and China in developing a port in North Korea. This seems to be the right direction for these discussions to go.
Yeah, actually, I think this is the right moment, and Professor Goldstein references the fact that the firing of Bolton makes it absolutely possible for Trump now to make such an approach. And he points to the fact that the northeast port of Razon, which is already connected by the Chinese through a modern road from Jilin province and through a rail connection to Vladivostok by Russia, connecting it to the Trans-Siberian Railway, that this actually creates the environment in which the Belt and Road Initiative cooperation creates the condition for a solution for North Korea, and that the United States should just contribute to it. This has been said by Trump at various occasions, that the United States will help to make North Korea a rich country. So I think that this is now a moment to really go in this direction. And with this development approach, you can solve any problem on the planet. That is absolutely in reach now, and I think we should go in this direction.
Well, we've covered a lot in this discussion because there's so much going on. But I think one of the most important things is that you emphasized your optimism at this moment. And it seems that one of the major problems we have is the pessimism of a lot of good people who have bought into the line that there's nothing that can be done. And this is why I think you keep emphasizing, one of the reasons, the importance of Lynn's exoneration. But I wonder if you just want to take a last moment here to bring up this whole question of why it's necessary for people to be optimistic in approaching their lives.
Well, as I have stated in the past, the reason why this whole Greta Friday for Future Extension Rebellion, why this is so bad, is because it instills an incredible, not only panic, but cultural pessimism. If you think that the world is ending, in 18 months, as Charles is saying, or Prince Charles for that matter, or, maybe 12 years, as AOC is saying, this is just, it's scientifically absolutely absurd. This will not be the case. And it has a terrible effect on people. There's already a whole area of eco-depression, eco-psychology. This is really disturbing people and causing them. The FAZ, the German Frankfurt Allgemeine Zeitung, they had a terrible editorial Prima Klima ohne Kinder, a fantastic climate without children, where they actually say, that every additional child born is a burden and should not be born, and that old people should commit suicide to, keep the climate in shape. I mean, this is what this leads to. It leads to a form of insanity. And many years ago, I wrote an article saying that cultural pessimism is a form of mental disease. And I really think that that's the case. On the other side, if you look at people who have put forward optimistic visions about the future of humanity, like the space pioneers, like Hermann Obert, like Robert Goddard, like Kraft Erike and my husband, who all had this idea that, mankind is at a very early phase of our development. The colonization of the moon and then Mars are just the first steps. That we will, once we have fusion power as propulsion for interstellar flights, you can actually envision that future generations, maybe a century or two away, but in the thinkable future, that we will expand in the solar system, that we will have a presence in the galaxy, and who knows, maybe beyond, that we will populate the universe as we populate the planet Earth. And the idea that you have like Earth-like conditions on exoplanets, that you can create conditions with large cities on Mars, with large cupolas, where you can create conditions like on Earth. I mean, all of these things, while they may not be possible tomorrow, I think it inspires people. I mean, I was so fascinated to reread about that it was actually Jules Verne who inspired all the space pioneers in Russia, in Germany, in the United States. And, you can say that this was a novel, but many of the things he predicted became true. So I think it is important to look at the stars and be optimistic about the limitless ability of man to improve, both intellectually and morally. And I think that that is absolutely what is the nature of man. And therefore, we have all the reasons to be optimistic.
Well, Helga, thank you again for giving us a super dose of optimism, and we'll see you next week.
Yes, till next week.